Hopefully we get some questions in as well. That'd be fantastic. I'm just going to close this manifesto. It's pointless. No offence.
Jesus. Sorry, this will be a ignorant 2 minutes just so we can get this shared.
No, that's okay.
You watched the debates last night?
No, I was at one.
Or do you, but it was on at 10 o'clock.
Was it on at 10?
Because I thought I'd missed it as well, but I got ahead when it was on. I started watching it at 11:15, so I got the last 15 minutes. It's fantastic.
I never realised it was on again.
Was it? It might have been shown after it was on.
It was on from 7:30 till 9.
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
It was on BBC Parliament at 10 o'clock.
That'll be why it was so quick on iPlayer then, because I watched it on iPlayer. That'll be why it was so quick online then.
Oh, right. Fair enough.
See, so it was
Right.
streamed again.
It must have been streamed again on
Aye.
BBC Parliament, right?
Okay, I never knew that.
Are you shared to your...
Oh, no. Is it live?
Aye.
So we're live right now,
Aye.
so people can hear us right now.
I would just basically talking background
Right.
noise now.
So it's good to know that there are 3 live people taking part in this.
Yeah. A lot of our live viewers tend to be us, so that's... Another issue is that because we come on just whenever people are free,
Aye.
there isn't a consistent time for people to...
And this was pretty last minute, so we didn't have time to
No, that's
advertise
okay.
it properly.
An inconsistent podcast.
No.
Right.
Jason McEwen's saying, yes, Roger.
Yes.
Very good.
I'm wondering if Jason knows who Roger is.
Of course he does. Jason's a fine fellow.
Right, there you go. Right.
I think Jason's in this constituency, I don't even think he's in your...
Right, you bring up the video on your your screen, just so we can see the notifications and stuff.
That doesn't work.
Full screen.
How do you do it?
Just click-
Now, the
click them all.
thousands of people listening to this should be assured that the technology is being worked by the wonderful Craig.
That's it.
But they know, they're aware that I'm the techie guy.
The man.
I'm the only techie guy that there needs to be. I think we're working,
Right, that's cool.
We're live.
That's ready to go.
although I can't see...
It's been ready to go since I started.
Jason
We're
put up
just-
a comment and I can't see where it is.
It was just yes, Roger.
Commented on your video. Oh, he's commented on the share
Aye.
your...
Right, if you go to the Besides the
Aye.
Norm page, put the video. Jesus.
I know, but I'm saying that he commented
You have to
on...
bear with us, Roger. We
he
just got
commented-
this started today.
He commented on your
It
share.
doesn't matter. Just do
So
what
I'm
you
just-
did today.
I'm just saying.
Go
It's done, it's done. But if you're wanting comments, you're going to get comments on your one as well. Which is the point I was making.
I'll just keep it up here then.
Professional.
Well, this is amazing. I mean, I've only taken part in podcasts from Westminster and
Much less professional than us.
other studios, and I must say this is very different.
Have you been on TV?
And oh yeah, quite often.
How does this compare to TV?
It's slightly different. The interviewers are much more charming here. of
Yes,
course.
I agree.
Thank you very much, Roger. There you go.
You're noted for it.
That
I was told you have to go to Kennewy if you want to get a charming interviewer who will ask intelligent questions, unlike some of the daft folk in television.
yes.
Right, but with a certain je ne sais quoi about them.
I appreciate your charm here. This is very nice. But
Right, what we've figured out is we need to figure out a better way of getting this quicker done. So
You
Yeah.
nearly said that there.
I nearly said quickerly done as well. It's a terrible word. Terrible word.
right, so we've got
Right.
one viewer, which is me.
Well, it's going well so far.
It's
then.
going well so far.
It says, I know Roger Mullin well, Craig, fine well, Craig. Some man, hey, fun trips.
Oh,
Thanks.
so apparently you and Jason McEwen are like that.
Jason
Oh.
McEwen.
We are well known.
Right.
There you go. Perfect.
Jason McEwen is a grime artist. Do you know what grime is?
It's stuff you sweep up.
It's the stuff that Jeremy Corbyn. The stuff that Jeremy Corbyn's getting right into the new, the grime stuff. But right, I think we'll officially start. I think.
Aye, we've started. I
Right.
think that's a start.
Well, should we not just say?
I've been in some TV interviews where it ends by now.
You're just getting warmed up, Roger.
When I was in Daily Politics
Right.
a few months ago, 8 minutes was a long interview, I was told.
Well, that's it. We'll just say we've got Roger Mullin in the SNP candidate for the Kirkcaldy area.
Kirkcaldy and Cowdenbeath.
Kirkcaldy and Cowdenbeath area. And obviously you've heard us just talking there about some stuff. You want to give us a quick introduction and then we'll sort of start officially from there. Hopefully.
Yeah, sure. Well, for the last 2 years, I've been a Member of Parliament in Kirkcaldy and Cowdenbeath until this general election was declared, and I'm standing again as a candidate in this general election, this surprise general election that Theresa May has thrown on everybody. And so there's only a week before polling, but I thought, how could I possibly refuse an invite to come along to one of the world's famous podcasts?
Yes, I'll drink to that.
Do you want me to say anything else about my background? You just asked me questions, guys.
We'll just ask some questions.
Yeah.
So, how long have you been in the SNP? Has it been a while?
It's been a long... I mean, it's going to be hard to believe, given my young looks, but I've been in the SNP for close on 50 years.
Wow.
Right.
That's quite
I
a long
joined
time.
in the 1960s.
So you were in the days where the SNP were small and struggling.
I'm just going to ask that.
Well, it's a good question because I was in from the time it was very small. Indeed, I had a really interesting experience the other week because a guy called Professor James Mitchell, who's a professor of politics at Edinburgh University, wanted to interview me. And as you probably know, I'm still an honorary professor at Stirling University. And so he said to me, right, I want to ask you about why you got involved in politics. And so I started to weave this elegant explanation, as politicians often do, but also sophisticated analysis. And he says, no, Roger, let's start that again. Right? When you joined, you were a teenager, right? You couldn't possibly have thought like that
I suppose
then. So I find that really interesting, having to reflect on what I think was my motivations to join all those years ago and the influences that affect people in life very often are more significant than what they tell people is the reason that they joined.
So there's a possibility though that in your teenage years you were a bit of a rebel. You maybe just wanted to join the small parties because it wasn't the Conservatives, it wasn't Labour, it was a small sort of underdog party.
Yeah, but as best I can understand what motivated me now, I think there were three things that motivated me. I was born, although I've lived in my constituency now for about 35 years, I was born and my early years were spent in a small town in Ayrshire called Maybole, and my mum and dad were both from Ayrshire. And I think there were three influences on my life that led me in this direction. One was my father. My father in the late 1920s was almost killed in an accident down a pit. Right? And he was in hospital 6 months, and he came out, and because he was never able to get back to that, so he became a baker, which didn't pay very well, so he joined the Territorial Army, as a lot of young men would do. And he was in it throughout the 30s and the like. He was then called up. Now, he had to leave school at 14, right? And never had any qualifications in his life, right? But from my point of view, a remarkably intelligent guy. And very, very unusually for a working class lad going into the army, by the time he finished, I think the last campaign he was in Burma, he had a Burma star. Right. And when he came out, just before he came out of the army, people were deciding what they were going to do because the war was over. He had reached the rank of captain, which was very surprising. Right? And but he was getting people like colonels and all the rest of it coming to him who were applying for senior jobs in the British civil service and asking him to fill out their forms for him. Right? He couldn't apply because he never went to a private school. So they were only accepting applications from people from private schools.
Right.
So when my dad was telling me about this just as a wee boy, that really infuriated me. That my dad, who I loved, and was a very kind man, but very intelligent, I thought, what a terrible way to treat somebody who fought in the war, right, was very able, but because people went to a different school, they were going to get plum jobs, and he was going to be sent back to effectively start looking for a job again. So I think that kind of influence was where I got, without knowing the word social class and the like, but the prejudices that faced the generation before mine were particularly severe, and I think that I became interested in what today you would call social justice type matters.
Mm-hmm.
The second thing that interested me or influenced me was my mother, right? So as a wee boy, my mother used to come to my bed at night, as no doubt lots of folk listening here would be the same, and used to sing me songs. But the songs she predominantly sang to me were Scottish songs,
Right.
and she sang a lot of Burns songs. And her side of the family, through my maternal line, their surname is Roger, and that's where I get my Christian name, or one of my many Christian names from, is Roger. Right? And my great-great-great-great-grandfather was a man called Hugh Roger, who was Robert Burns' teacher in Ayrshire.
Right.
Oh,
And so I grew up with the idea of being concerned about social justice predominantly from my dad's side and his experience, and an interest in Scottish culture predominantly from my mother's side. And then the third thing that influenced me was I was the baby of the family as well. I had a brother who's 8 years older than me and a sister who's 4 years older than me. Went to a wee school, Maybole, called Carrick Academy.
Mm-hmm.
My brother and sister were extraordinarily bright, and my brother was the first in our family to go to university. Went to Glasgow University, did a double honours maths and physics, and then couldn't get a job. Couldn't get a job offer in home country. And so what eventually happened was the only job offer he got was in Canada, in the Atomic Energy of Canada. And so he emigrated. He had never had any ambition to leave Scotland. But because he couldn't get a job, there was a very well qualified guy in his early 20s left for Canada. By the time Jimmy was 30, he was the secretary of the Science Council in Canada. And he went on from there. When in South Africa, Nelson Mandela was released, and the new South African government had to create its own policies. Jimmy was flown from Canada to South Africa, and I'm quite proud of the fact that he met Nelson Mandela, and he wrote the first science and technology policy for the new South Africa.
That's pretty awesome, right?
How come somebody could be like that? Oh, and he also, by the way, just as an aside, he chaired the OECD, that's the Organisation for Economic Cooperation and Development, the most advanced countries in the world. He chaired its Science and Technology Committee for a number of years.
is he free for a podcast?
Well, unfortunately, he died a couple of years ago of cancer. But there was somebody who could achieve that in his life but couldn't get a job here. And similarly, my sister subsequently, very bright, immigrated to Canada as well. So I became concerned. I've been concerned all my life. The problem Scotland has is not one of immigration. The problem Scotland traditionally has had is one of emigration.
I think you said that last night as well, right?
People of real talent and ability who want to contribute here have not been given the opportunity to contribute here. So I think these three influences within my family, the sort of social justice side, the cultural side, and the why can we not provide decent opportunities, particularly for young people in our own homeland, I think all these things came together. It was very easy to dismiss the Tories. It was also, I have to say, very easy to dismiss the Labour Party. They were full of rhetoric, but never deliver for ordinary people. Indeed, in many ways, live off their back. And so, I didn't respond last night, but at the debate last night, when everybody decided every now and again it was all the SNP's fault, SNP bad. You might have noticed I decided not to respond to that. I chose to do this unusual thing of just answering the questions I was asked from the audience. You know,
Imagine that. Imagine that.
it'll catch on sometime.
I hope it does. That'd be great. That's one of my biggest pet hates.
But what I felt like saying, so I'll say now, when the Labour candidate was saying, you know, poverty and pensions are it's partly all the responsibility of the SNP and the like, I felt like reminding her that in the early 2000s, in the year when the previous MP, Gordon Brown, as Chancellor, said there was an unlimited sum available to fund an illegal war in Iraq, and the UK could afford to spend billions dropping bombs, most of them on innocent people, that was the same time he offered a 75 pence rise in pensions. So don't anybody from the Labour Party come along and tell me they have always been a party concerned primarily about justice. They've been as imperialistic, certainly over the last post-war situation. They have been as imperialistic in their attitude as the Tories have been.
Right.
And so that's one of the reasons why I was happy to accept the invitation a few months ago to go to Iraq. Because even although my contribution there might be very, very modest, I just felt making any contribution that's about trying to get something done in a peaceful way is a lot better than simply saying the only time we're going to visit those lands is when we are sending in bombs or the military.
Yep.
So
Exactly.
that concerns. So internationalism in that sense concerns me. Now, the reason that concerns me is because of what my career eventually became. So that before I was an MP, I ran my own research companies, small ones, right? Very small. And I did 27 international assignments,
Jeez, right.
mainly for the United Nations agencies. And all 27 were related to the developing world. So I've done 16 assignments in different parts of Africa, as well as in the Middle East. At one time I thought I was being kidnapped in the Yemen. A number of years ago I've done work in countries that probably people have never heard of, like the Marshall Islands in the middle of the Pacific Ocean and the like, which is an independent country with a population of 48,000.
They're
Right.
too wee. They're too wee to be
They're
independent.
too wee, they're too wee and too rich to be independent. Yeah, so I have. It wasn't initially through my family circumstances, but eventually I became very interested in international affairs. And that's why one of the things I said last night at the debate that gets me, I tried to bring in a private members bill in the last Parliament to deal with things that go by the very obscure name of double taxation treaties with the developing world. Right? And why did I do that? Despite all the aid that goes into Africa, African countries lose more taxation than they get in total aid.
Right.
And so that, for example, since 1955, the UK has had a taxation treaty with one of the poorest countries in the world in Africa, called Malawi. It was actually a tax treaty that's a carryover from the days even before it was Malawi. It was called,
Right.
this part was called Nyasaland. Right? And neither a Conservative or a Labour government have ever been willing to change these double taxation treaties. And what does that do? It means basically that British companies operating in Malawi, the deal is that they pay their taxes to the UK Exchequer and not to the Malawian government.
That's wrong. That shouldn't be.
And the two countries in the world that are the biggest culprits for this are the UK and Italy. They're the countries that have got most disadvantageous taxation treaties with poor countries. So my private member's bill was to try and begin to address that. Now, it didn't get through, but that would be a matter where I think I would hope the sort of Scottish character, being interested in justice, not just for ourselves, but in justice for others, would be something that I would want to continue in the future. So of course I'm very concerned about social justice in my own country, but it's not to the exclusion of others who live in more difficult circumstances than anybody in our country does.
Just a question on that private members bill. Was it the sort of bill that got laughed away by the Tories and Labour, or were people taking it seriously and thinking, well, maybe this should stop, but there just wasn't enough people to vote against it?
The way in which a private member's bill works, I got as far as what's called the second reading, which is the debate in principle.
Mm-hmm.
But this is going to sound very technical, what you need to do in Parliament is you need to force a vote on your bill, right? And the only way you can do that, private members' bills come up on a Friday, and what you've got to do first of all is mount what is called a closure motion that says we want to have a vote on it.
Right.
And what you need to do is you need to have a minimum of 100 MPs turning up to support or even disapprove of your bill. And so the way in which to kill a private member's bill, the easiest way is not to turn up, and then they can't get a closure motion. So that's what happened to me. I mean, obviously I had a lot of my own colleagues who were there. I had the support of the Green MP, Caroline Lucas. I had the support of the SDLP. I had the support of Plaid Cymru. But even putting all those together was not near 100. There was a small number of Labour, I think about 5 or 6, and there was a similar small number of Tories. But because others didn't turn up, my bill fell without being voted on.
Was Dennis Skinner there?
No, Dennis wasn't.
Oh, that's upsetting. I was hoping he was going to be there.
I was going to say it's good to talk about the people turning up for these sort of certain events and stuff like that, because I don't know if you've seen the picture floating about where it's talking about all the kind of people in Westminster turning up for sort of to check about their wages and the house is full.
Well, that
basically.
relates to the Lords. The Lords have to turn up and clock in to get their £300 a day tax free.
Aye.
Right? MPs don't need to turn up at all to get paid.
So they still get paid, even though. Cause that's one of the problems. Because that picture had there was a few different bills getting suggested and stuff like that. There was something to do with
there was one about disabilities,
and stuff like that. But the full, everybody was there for their kind of something to do with their wages or something like that at the end. It was something to do with
a debate on something to do with pay for MPs.
Do you find that quite often?
No, I don't think that was in the last 2 years. I think.
Oh no, that was before.
That was before
That's
then. Yeah.
It was a general picture to show.
No, I've seen that picture before. Those issues of MP pay and expenses were completely changed before the last Parliament, and so the MPs don't have any say anymore in what their pay or expenses are going to be. That's set by an independent body called IPSA, which I think is sensible. Why should you decide what you're going to be paid, or why should you decide what your expenses are?
Mm-hmm.
You know, so it's very different now from what it was. It still needs a lot of improvement, but it's better than in the days when people could get money for cleaning out their duck pond and all that sort of stuff. I mean, they couldn't do that nowadays, but it still needs a bit more tightening up in my view.
Mm-hmm. Definitely, aye. Well,
I thought you had something.
Oh, sorry, aye. I was going to say, obviously, when the SNP first sort of got voted in, to a sort of a huge amount, was just after the independent referendum.
Oh.
That was when the SNP first started getting was it 50 odds?
I think before that, the most they had was about 8.
Aye.
In terms of Westminster,
Westminster.
we've always found it difficult in terms of Westminster historically.
Mm-hmm.
The biggest number before 2015 that the SNP ever had elected was in the October 1974 election, which is a long time ago, when there was 11. That was the high water mark. So to get over 50 in the 2015 election was definitely a sea change in politics.
Was there something specific that happened in 1974 that got 11, or was it just happened to be good campaigning?
Yeah, I think there was a lot of very good local campaigning, and we had some really well-known in Scotland high-profile candidates. I mean, one of them was a guy called George Reid, who used to run a politics show on the BBC, so he was on
Right.
television a lot. So he was elected. He was very articulate, but he was very well known.
Mhm.
And we had people who were well known in their localities, and so that was helpful. There was there was the beginning of a move towards an interest in home rule,
Right.
as it was called, or devolution and the like. You've got to remember, in those days there was no Scottish Parliament or
No.
anything.
Mhm.
Right? But it meant that in small numbers, they were still not the third party in Parliament. The thing that has made a difference in Westminster is if you've got enough SNP MPs as we had in the last 2 years, it means you're the third party in Parliament.
Mhm.
Now, believe it or not, that becomes very significant and gives you more chance of participation in all sorts of ways, so that your leader in Parliament is guaranteed questions at Prime Minister's question time. We never had that in the past.
Yep.
Right.
You're guaranteed a place on every select committee. You're guaranteed a place in every bill committee, right, and so on. So what it means is, being the third party, you carry much more influence than you could as a smaller party. Although what we've tried to do is we've tried on occasions to accommodate some of the smaller parties who are more disadvantaged, like Plaid Cymru, like the Greens and
Mhm.
SDLP, things like that. But yeah, so from a technical point of view, given the way Westminster works, it's quite important to be in one of the top three parties. Right? And so this is the first time in the third parties. First time we had all these rights to places on committees. First time we had rights to questioning of ministers on the floor of the House. Questions that were guaranteed. So that's made a big difference. We have, in some ways to my surprise, we have forced a number of changes, even although the Tories had a majority. You can really embarrass them, and if you keep working really hard at it over a long period of time, right, sometimes you can force them to change.
Mhm.
Now, sometimes if you can mobilise a big outcry, they will do a U-turn pretty quickly.
Mhm.
Right? There has not been a budget. In my 2 years, they actually had 3 budgets. And in each
Right.
of those budgets, the longest anyone lasted before there was at least one major U-turn was 4 days, because of the outcry at what they were proposing.
Mm.
And so we had a big pressure on about some things they were doing in national insurance and some things they were doing about tax credits, and they did a U-turn in those. There are other things that were more difficult that you can still get. I actually got the government to move on activity associated with mass criminality through the business sector,
Mhm.
through the use of things called limited partnerships that criminals in Eastern Europe were using, and I showed they were using it. I eventually got a newspaper, the Herald, based in Glasgow, became very supportive and began to write articles about the campaign. I then laid down questions. I managed to question the Prime Minister, I questioned the Chancellor of the Exchequer, I wrote letters, I got on committees, I created a bloody nuisance of myself. I'm sorry, I have just sworn on the promise not to say anything.
Oh,
Well, we didn't swear.
bloody's fine. I think bloody's.
Am
no,
I
you're
allowed
right, you're fine.
bloody?
No, you're allowed that. We'll allow that.
Okay. My apologies if I've offended any of your listeners. So by creating that nuisance myself, eventually what I did was I forced them just before, earlier in this year, before the general election was declared,
Mhm.
to agree to have a review of the operation of these limited partnerships with a view to tackling the criminality. So initially they didn't want to go near it.
Mhm.
Initially they didn't want to do anything. But just by continually campaigning and making a nuisance of yourself,
Mhm.
right, and getting some wider support,
Mhm.
that's what's also very important. By getting a newspaper on board, by getting some public interest on board, eventually able to move the government. You've got to be willing to be a bit pig-headed and just keep going and not
Right.
let them off the hook. But I think we've got a reputation for not letting them off the
You've
hook.
got a bit of that, aye.
Aye.
I used to watch Parliament TV, but I had to stop because it was painful to watch
You were actually quite in deep on that. Actually.
Aye, for a while.
A good few weeks I would go past your and I would just hear people shouting.
Aye,
for
but
ages,
you never hear a question answered. You just hear the
you
question.
told me about this process, right? They go into Parliament, like you would go in with an idea, and then they would get a chance to sort of a rebuttal sort of thing, and then that would be it.
Occasionally you get to come back again, but not all the time. What are the rules for that?
Very rarely.
That is annoying.
The only person who gets to come back would be either the leader of the opposition or the leader of the third party.
Right.
At questions to either the Prime Minister or any other minister. And that's because they're allowed multiple questions. So Jeremy Corbyn, leader of the opposition, was allowed 6 questions at Prime Minister's question time. So that meant it was back and forth.
Right.
Angus Robertson, as our leader, was allowed 2 questions. After that, it depends whether you won the raffle, because they run raffles every day in Parliament.
Literally a raffle.
A shuffle. They call it a shuffle. Posh word for a raffle. But when you wonder why does the Speaker choose so and so to ask a question, you see?
Aye.
What happens is you put your name in to ask a question, and then they have a draw. And so, if in Prime Minister questions you get in the top 10, you're likely to be asked to ask the question.
You're likely to be asked, so it's not even guaranteed.
Oh, it's kind of guaranteed that you will in the first 10 or so. But
at least you get your name in the tombola. Basically, is what happens.
They might draw 15 out of the hat, you see, so you might not. If you're towards the tail end, you might not get called. There will then be others get called because they bounce up and down, so that there are some people favoured. So that if you're a right honourable, right, you will get called more often than just an ordinary honourable.
How do you become a right honourable?
You become a member of the Privy Council.
So you're not a right honourable?
I am certainly not a right honourable.
Gutted by that accusation there as well. Aye.
My bad, I didn't mean to offend anybody.
I think we've got 2 right honourables in the last SNP group.
Right.
One was Alex Salmond, because he was the former First Minister of Scotland, and one was Angus Robertson, as the leader of the third party.
So they will always be right honourable?
They are right honourable. So they're members of this thing called the Privy Council. It's notionally a group of people who technically advise the monarch on things.
But it doesn't mean anything really in practical terms.
It just gives them a favoured status in Parliament.
See, this is.
It's all these kind of old rules that come in, like the right honourable thing and all that kind of stuff. Can we not do away with some of this stuff? Do you not feel the same way?
Oh, the culture of the place I find appalling. Very undemocratic.
So
see, when you went in, was there like a long sort of display of certain ways you were to introduce yourself to certain things?
Oh, you get a week's induction where you're told all these things.
It's like a gym.
Aye, well, we get into trouble. Well, I get into severe trouble in the very first day I was there at the induction. I did something worse than that. You see, you're not allowed to take photographs within the chamber. Right?
Alright.
I went across after an induction session and I was leaning on what they call the dispatch box of the Prime Minister, and one of my colleagues took a photograph of me and another one tweeted it.
Oh.
Right? Now, this was like...
Nearly.
And then it just shows you how they're on top of everything. When I walked out the chamber, about 2 minutes later, I was met by one of the staff of the Sergeant of Arms. He's the bloke with the great big sword.
I was going to say, seems like a guy with a sword.
And they said to me, Mr. Mullin, you have to report to the Sergeant Arms straight away. I said, why? Because of what you did. You've broken the rules of Parliament.
Leaning.
So I went down. Now, the Sergeant of Arms wasn't there, but the Deputy Sergeant of Arms was there.
Right.
Who obviously didn't know why I had been sent down. He said, you've been sent down? Yes. Why have you been sent down, Mr. Mullin? I said, I was leaning on a box. And I got this look in the box. And the deputy tried not to laugh, but eventually broke up and just said, well, don't lean in that box again.
What's the punishment for that?
Pardon?
What is the punishment?
I've no idea what it is.
Why has he got a sword?
Is it a fine? Do you get arrested for leading
I
on the votes?
I don't know. No, it was a photograph bit.
For
Leading
the
votes was okay.
photograph.
The photograph.
Like,
Aye.
I don't
Didn't
know.
he get caught
I
getting
didn't. I got a,
pictured?
I didn't even get a ticking off. I got a sort of funny wry
yeah,
smile,
could-
and away you go.
they can't be as pretentious as they look. A lot of these people,
Mm.
because surely
Some of
it's
them
a
are-
total pantomime. Sometimes.
Some of them are. Some of the staff are actually fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the people who get on very well with these people called doorkeepers. Loads of them. Loads of doorkeepers. These are people that always wear black tails and white bow ties. And they're the ones that really know what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So that you need a lot of them because, for example, if you vote, you know how in the Scottish Parliament you can have quite a lot of votes, and you do it by pressing a button, and within seconds
It's
you have the
modern
result.
and works.
Right? Well, it's modern and it works. Well, they don't have anything that is modern and works in Westminster.
No.
So what you've got is a lobby system. And that is when you see in the telly the whole of the chamber, right? Well, down beyond the wall on the right-hand side of where the speaker's right hand, right the length of that is a big long lobby. That's the I lobby.
Mm-hmm.
And on his left hand, right down, there's this great big room, which is the no lobby.
Oh, so I thought it was just the opposition went to one room and then.
No, what it is
And-
depends on whether you're voting aye or no on any proposal. So sometimes you might vote aye if it's one of your
Right, I didn't kid that.
resolutions. Sometimes it'll be no, right? And people vary. So, but what you've got to do is you've got to get in one of these rooms first. And there's 3 ways of getting in. One is the main entrance, which is outside the Commons, and it takes 2 doorkeepers to hold the door open for exactly 8 minutes for you to get inside. And then there's 2 doors into each lobby in the chamber, and there's got to be a doorkeeper there to open that door. You get in one at a time. But once you're in the lobby, there's no time limit on how long it takes you to walk to the other end to vote. So people meet there for chats and they sit down. They've even got tables where you can sit down and write a letter if you fancy it before you finish your voting. So it takes about 15 or 20 minutes to vote. And when you get to the end of the lobby, right, what you're met with is 3 clerks who are sitting at desks that always reminds me of a Charles Dickens novel. They're these very tall desks, you see? And what you do is you walk up and you say your name and they score you off. So I walk up and say, Roger Mullin, scored off. But you're not finished then. You've then got to exit the lobby. Now to exit the lobby, this takes another 2 doorkeepers, but they don't open the doors fully wide so that more than one person get out at a time. They only open it
Single
partially, so you've got to go out single file. So there's always a big crush. Now when you get single file,
Yeah.
at the other end there are these people called whips, and what they do is one of them out loud will raise his finger, this is very important, and goes up and down and counts you 1, 2, 3, 4, and at the end of it, the people who physically counted you out, the whips, have to check up if they get the same number as the clerks who've scored you off in the bit of paper, and that's when they know the result. And then they've got to go through this bowing and all the rest of it before they read out the result. So to have one vote can take 20 minutes, not the 1 minute or whatever it takes to
Aye.
Scottish
Can
Parliament.
you not put
Now,
forward?
because of that, sorry, just to finish this, to show you how ridiculous this is. Because of that, the Speaker doesn't allow many votes, Parliament. So when the first time I was there, I was leading for SNP in the finance bill, which was 800 pages long. It's the bill that implements the budget.
Right.
And eventually it comes to the time when you can vote on it in the floor of the House at what's called report stage. And when I was in it, we had laid down dozens of amendments. Labour had laid down dozens of amendments. And the Speaker let it be known when the debate was going on that he was only going to allow the SNP to have 1 vote, and he was only going to allow the Labour Party to have 2 votes, and we had to decide quickly which one we wanted to vote on. So the
Right.
Speaker has tremendous power to determine not which one will be voted on, but how many you get. And why was that? Because 3 votes were taken out. It takes an hour out of the business of the day.
God.
So the way in which it's run by a culture and a preference to follow tradition rather than a preference for efficiency. And it actually leads to very poor scrutiny of legislation. Because if you know we're only going to get 1 vote or 2 votes, then why would you expend a colossal amount of effort trying to make 50 changes to the bill if you know you're going to be effectively prevented on the floor of the House from being able to vote. So they're able to have far more votes on legislation in the Scottish Parliament because it takes only the time of pressing a button.
And of course, the rubbish system in Westminster also makes it harder to reform Westminster as well.
It makes it very difficult. To get a reform, you would be able to reform it if you could get a majority of MPs, but the majority of Conservative and Labour MPs like the system.
Because it helps them.
It maybe helps them, they just get very used to it, and it's like
Used to all the kind of bowing
nice club. It just they like it. I mean, they're very much opposed, both Conservative and Labour, to reforming the lobby system and to introduce electronic voting. Why is that? They say it's good. It's the only chance we get to chat to some people while we're voting in the lobbies.
Chatting your own thing, man.
You know, well, you are there for ages because it takes ages to do it. But if you had a electronic voting system, you'd have more time to speak to people out with the chamber.
Now, you know what your problem is. You're trying to be rational about this now.
I know.
Stop it.
It's one of the many faults in my life.
I know. This is not... Westminster's not rational. I mean, I said it, I know this is a jocular way at you, but being serious, it doesn't order its business to be rational. It orders its business to follow tradition and the way in which things have always been done, and that's what becomes so very, very important. They don't want to disrupt the culture of Parliament. And to be honest, a lot of people watching it like the ritual.
I hate it.
Right?
That's why I didn't watch it in the mirror, I guess. I prefer Scottish Parliament.
I don't like it. You've got to say some people do like it.
That's it. Is only ever the SNP you ever hear talking about this kind of side of things, about just the ridiculous traditions that you have to go through. Mary's been quite open about the whole thing. It's actually really funny when you listen to her.
She says now that she hates it more than she's been than she did beforehand.
I think that would be... You see, some people love it more because they love tradition, and some people, like Mary, like myself and others, we just think, actually, we would be able to do a better job for the people that elected us if this place would organise itself on a rational basis.
It's pretty much everybody in the SNP sort of thinking this along the same lines. Sort of, it's just stupid.
It is. It's remarkably stupid. It's counterproductive to being a good representative.
I know. Another question. At the end, when Parliament closes, like when the debate's finished and all that, someone randomly walks across the room with either I think it's a sword or a
staff,
thing,
maybe
a staff thing.
A mace.
They just walk.
A mace, right?
Aye, they walk over and then they just walk through the Parliament and then walk away again.
I think you're talking about the Sergeant of Arms, who's breeches on. He's the bloke with the sword. And they will carry a mace.
Aye.
And they put it there. Now, there's two places the mace can go, believe it or not.
Oh, that's important.
I could think of a third place.
This is very important. When the mace is on top of the table, that is the table where you see the Prime Minister and Leader of Opposition.
Aye, that's what I've seen that thing. Aye.
When the mace is up high, that means Parliament as a whole is sitting. Right? And it has authority to speak and the like. When the mace goes on hooks below the table, that means Parliament is only sitting as a committee of the House, and the Speaker's not in the chair then. There's just somebody sitting in a clerk's chair. So the mace has to be there for the House to be sitting with authority, either as the House as a whole or as a committee of the House.
So one last question before we'll get on to more stuff. How long does it take you from the minute you enter the building to actually sitting in a meeting? Is there like a whole process you have to go through for that, or can you just go in the building, walk in, sit down, done?
Oh, no.
Do you have to bill to some guy with...
No. That's fairly straightforward. I mean,
that's easy enough.
The days that the Commons meets varies every day, right? So the Commons sits on a Monday from 2:30 in the afternoon until at least 10:30 at night. If there's extended business, you might be going on to after midnight, right? On a Tuesday and a Wednesday, it starts at 11:30 and finishes at 7:30. And on a Thursday, it starts at 9:30 and finishes at 5:30. These finishing times can vary.
No.
Right. But what happens is, at the same time as those are going on, there is a smaller debating chamber called Westminster Hall, where there might be some other debates taking place, although those debates in Westminster Hall don't lead to legislation or anything like that. They're just a forum for debating an issue that people are concerned about. And committees will meet, like select committees or bill committees. So you tend to have 3 different parliamentary activities going on at one and the same time. Meetings in the chamber, meetings in Westminster Hall, and committees of one sort or another. But of course people then meet out with those hours too.
Yeah.
So that, for example, the reason I would go down to Parliament on a Sunday night, travel down to London on a Sunday night, is so that I can use the whole of the Monday morning and then early afternoon to have other meetings where I maybe want to meet constituents that are down, where I want to maybe have informal meetings with different groups, charities and the like, so that, for example, for my private members bill, I worked very closely with a charity called Action Aid. So I would have meetings with Action Aid and the like at those times. So you use the time, but you're not restricted. There's no ritual you have to go through. It's a matter of you
Just kind of stick to your own schedule.
fixing up your schedules for yourself. So that my tendency would be to go down on a Sunday evening, come back on a Thursday night, typically getting home either at 9 o'clock or midnight on a Thursday night, and spend Friday and Saturday working in the constituency. The only time I would be down in Westminster on a Friday is if there was a private member's bill I wanted to support, because Friday mornings are devoted to private members' bills.
There's very rarely a private member's bill, if I remember correctly. Because I used to...
There are a lot of them. Very rarely does one get through. That's why it was so pleasing that we actually got one of our member, Dr. Ailey Whiteford. She got private member's bill, which was to require the UK government to ratify the Istanbul Convention, which was about recognising the rights of women who had been abused and the like. So that was really good. There's a lot of it to get that done, but that was good. Whereas, again, they have a raffle to see where you are in the private members bill. We drew number 1, which is the person who's got most chance, and that was John Nicholson. He chose to bring in a bill that some people called the Turing Bill, after Alan Turing, who was
sort of reverse the homosexuality.
And it was to give a pardon to everybody, whether alive or dead, who may have been convicted in the past simply because they were gay. Sadly, that didn't get through because not enough Labour and Tory turned up to support it.
Got through in Scotland though, in the modern Parliament.
Yeah,
it got through.
And quickler.
Quickler.
I thought I'd had that word.
But Ailey's bill, she was I think 7th in the draw, so she was first on one of the Fridays. So she managed to muster the requisite numbers. So her bill did get through. So that was great.
Excellent.
I hate Westminster. It's such a terrible place. Why do you want to be re-elected? That sounds like a horrible...
Obviously, it must just be the fact that, like, obviously to try and help people as best you can.
Well,
that you have to go through that kind of stuff.
There's that. I mean,
you just have to get used to it as well.
It is a forum there where you want the voice of Scotland, of constituents, of yourself heard, right? It is the only UK forum at the moment we've got. We're currently in the UK, therefore it's something we've got to use. I'm like Mary Black. I mean, I will go down there. It's a job of work. There are some, I have to say, really positive things about doing it, and that is if you manage to get even modest changes, if you manage to get, say, a voice of your constituents heard, very often that's very important for them. So that, for example, before even before the European referendum, I raised the case of two of my constituents in Kirkcaldy and named them in the chamber with their permission. And that was to give them an example. They were considering leaving Scotland altogether because of the rhetoric around people who were not born here. And so that, for example, in the Scottish independence referendum, the Scottish government made sure that all EU citizens were allowed to vote in it, and 16-year-olds plus were allowed to vote in it. We tried to get the same with the European referendum, but what the government did was they prevented all European citizens from having a vote, as well as preventing younger people from having a vote. So, but somebody needs to be there to give voice to these concerns. Somebody needs to pressurise, and sometimes, as I've said, you can get U-turns made. You know.
So, what?
There's a couple of comments, man. Angela Galoli said, honest and open, and the man of his word. Roger Mullin, love the humour, bro. Oh no, sorry, I'm blind. It says two, not bro.
Love the humour too.
It's very handy if you're able to read.
It is definitely aye. Remo Giz Barcelona is a tattoo artist.
Oh.
He says, tell Roger to come for a tattoo.
Yeah, well, I would like you to ask, what kind of tattoo? I don't have any tattoos.
Right.
So what kind of tattoo do
Did
your
you go?
listeners and viewers think I should have?
You should, I ken gang members in prison get their gang tattooed on the inside of their lip.
I'm
So
not a
you get
member.
S-
I'm not,
SNP.
I'm not a
aye.
member of a gang.
You get
I
SNP
think
on
this is a remarkably bad idea.
I'm offended by it. Fantastic idea.
That's the comment so far.
The comments weren't coming up until I refreshed it. Now they're starting to show.
Aye. It's a weird system you've got on that.
It's very annoying.
Aye. There you go. So we were
How's
speaking.
this been for you guys? Okay.
It's been good. It's been good.
I
Aye,
see.
aye.
Because I've watched Parliament TV, but I've never been there.
Mhm.
It's interesting to hear the nonsense from somebody that's actually been there. Because
Well, here's
Take
an
it on.
I'm going to make an offer to you, and also an offer to anybody that's watching this. Right? If I am fortunate enough to be re-elected, right, and if you're ever down in London area, then contact me, and I'll happily try and arrange to take you around. I've taken a lot of constituents around. I've taken even school groups that have come down around and to see it. And there are some things that you will find fascinating. Now, you might not approve of everything, but nonetheless there are things that are fascinating to see and to help you understand. I mean, it's very much a traditional imperial parliament. I mean, that's how you do it. I mean, its main function for hundreds of years, you've got to remember, was to rule an empire.
That's it.
Right? So there are the trappings of that you can see in the way in which things are.
are you allowed in
times.
the House of Commons if you're not an elected MP?
Yeah, I can take you into the chamber at certain times, and that is as long as obviously it's not sitting, and up until an hour and a half before it's going to sit. The reason there's that hour and a half is because that's when the security go in with the guard dogs and everything, and they always do, before any sitting every day, they do a security check.
Right.
But before the security check happens, then I'm able to take people into the Commons.
So that's double check, make sure there's no Guy Fawkes type scenarios going to be happening.
Yeah, presumably things like that. Well, I mean, I don't want to joke about it because, as you know, a few months ago there was that terrible incident, albeit outside. And I was within 70 yards of it. I was outside and within about 70 yards of that poor policeman being murdered.
It's a thing that the people have different political beliefs, and I understand the anger against the UK government for the foreign policy, but to start killing people that are innocent is just it's unnecessary.
Well, in my view, I think you're quite right. In my view, there's absolutely no excuse for it.
No.
There's no excuse for somebody taking the law into their own hands and taking someone else's life.
Especially if your argument is that the UK government kills innocent people. To to make that argument and then go and kill an innocent person in protest is totally hypocritical as well. But it doesn't make any sense.
I agree with you 100%.
So next time we're in London,
I'm definitely up for that. Definitely up for going to see it. Will we get in dressed like this?
oh, is that a thing? Is there a dress code?
Yeah, we'll have to suit up.
Not for those
As long as you
kinds
dress
of
sort
visits.
of respectably, sort of thing.
You will be searched before you go in, of course.
Right. So if
Right.
say
So
I
no
was,
guns or anything like that, Craig.
so
Just
say if I
remember
was elected in Glenrothes.
Oh, there is a dress code for elected MPs if you want to go into the House.
All right.
Mm.
So
Oh,
when you
yeah.
go into the House to take part in the debate, I think you've got to be wearing a jacket, you've got to be wearing a tie, presumably trousers. So good
No
idea.
hats, presumably.
That's a very good point. Because it used to be you had
I
to
can
wear
give you a hat if you want to try
You
it.
had to wear a hat, but they've done away with that some years ago. So yeah.
Mhm.
So it's just conventional but sensible wear. They wouldn't like it if you went in with trainers.
I'd imagine so. Aye, that makes
Oh.
sense.
The disgust. Oh, you're wearing trainers. Well, you can't make laws,
Yeah.
idiot.
Well, look, can I tell you my favourite thing that I don't like about
Aye,
those economies?
go.
I thought we'd had a few. Perfect
Oh, no,
if there's
no.
more.
I'll tell
Perfect.
you- And by the way, my phone keeps on going.
I
I thought that was your phone.
A professional would have put it
Aye.
on silent.
Well, see, I forgot to tell him before we started, so that was
I'm
kind of...
getting all these folk on Facebook saying, I'm watching you.
Are you?
Could try harder. No. My favourite bit is there was a bit of a stushy, I think is the correct word, in the first 4 weeks after we were elected,
Mhm.
2015, of us having to get through terrible rituals of going to prayers every day and all the rest of it to try and get a seat. Because you're not allowed to take part in any debates on the House of Commons unless you're able to rise with your bum on one of the green benches, right? Now, there are 650 MPs, right? But at a crush, only 300 can get seated. So immediately, the architecture of the building disenfranchises the majority of MPs.
I didn't realise
No.
that at all. Jesus.
For the first 4 weeks, we were having to go. Why? Because the other parties would not recognise our right to sit in any of the green benches. So the Labour Party in particular, because we were in opposition as well, were organising themselves to go in early in the morning to sit on the bit that traditionally was for the third party. And it took us 4 weeks to come to an agreement that we would have a place to sit. When you don't have an agreement about that, the only way you can guarantee yourself is turn up to prayers every day, which are bizarre in themselves.
Right.
But you had to do that, and you put in a wee card and you put it in a slot behind the seat that you've been praying from, and because of that you're able to return and take part and take that seat for the next session. So there was all these sorts of rituals that take place. And then I'm not a frequenter of the churches anymore.
Yeah.
I can imagine
You're
that.
trying very hard to say that nicely.
But when I was in there for the first time to prayers, right? By the way, it's always the same prayers every day.
Born. Constantly
Every
same
day,
one.
it's exactly the same prayers. High Anglican prayers. It's the only denomination that's allowed any their voice in praying. So in would come the procession with the speaker and the Anglican priest, and it goes up. Anglican priest says a few words, blah de blah de blah de blah, and then says, "Let us pray." Now, me being good fella brought up here, I thought, well, I'll be respectful. So I went to clasp my hands, right, as you do for prayer, and bow my head, as
Amateur.
did in the SNP benches. And we saw, what is happening around us? And we realised that is not how you pray there. How you pray is you're on your feet and you turn round and face the wall. And so you pray while on your feet turning around facing the wall. We try to find out what on earth is this about. But even asking the doorkeepers, we get different explanations as to why that might have been historically. But in other words, this is a traditional way in which they do it, and they're not sure themselves why. The explanation, which I don't know if it's true, but the one that I thought was most convincing to me is it's in the days when if you had a sword, it's so that if you had to genuflect, you wouldn't stab somebody. But who knows? Who knows what the truth is?
That place needs to go away.
I take it you didn't get much time to kind of air those thoughts a lot of time, because I could tell you were enjoying yourself going through all these.
I know, I'm sorry. You see, this is like catharsis for me.
That's
I'm not
great.
able to
Do you not
say
get in
this.
trouble for dismissing this in the way?
Do you think anybody's going to see this of any importance? Didn't there?
Theresa
Of
May is
course.
listening right now.
Everybody's important.
Theresa May
See
is
my
listening.
pals out there. They're important.
Well, there's 60 people.
You're the most important people.
They
There
are,
you go,
definitely.
There you go.
You know?
And we've got all the exclusive hatred towards the
But
parliament
I'm
we've got
trying
for
to
Roger
do
there.
it with some
Some
style,
humour at least as
some
well.
humour.
You're not just being nasty about it as well. We're having a
we're not
laugh
even
about how
nasty about it.
ridiculous it
And
is.
some people, and you've got to say that there are some other people who've got every right to their own opinion.
Exactly,
Who,
yeah.
who love this stuff.
Mhm.
I just don't think for a modern democracy it's the way to run things.
But when you go
That's
back down,
my
you're not
point
going to
of
get
view.
bullied by the other MPs who are going to be like, no.
No, they wouldn't try and bully me about that.
I say when, as if obviously we don't know if.
We don't know. If I was fortunate enough to be re-elected and I go down there,
Let's talk about what you think the chances are. Are you confident?
I've not looked at the bookies odds,
Mhm.
so I don't know what the
But
bookies
what were
odds
the
are.
results last time? Obviously you won, but who came
Yes.
second?
I
Labour,
won. Labour came
presumably.
second.
Right.
I had a majority of just about 10,000,
Right.
and I think the Conservatives were third, Liberal Democrats fourth,
Can't remember.
So,
UKIP fifth.
oh, did you have a UKIP guy in your...
Got a UKIP.
A wee
I've got,
UKIP
I've
guy.
got the star UKIP guy in Kirkcaldy and Cowdenbeath.
Oh, the David Coburn you
David Coburn
Ah,
is standing, although he didn't turn up to the debate last night.
No, I didn't. No. Why not?
Probably because it was about equalities and he doesn't believe in it.
He's a
Yes!
He's a
Yes,
gay,
Roger.
he's a gay man.
That's
He'd
exactly
be the
why.
only- he would have been the only person who was gay up there.
Actually, that would have been a help.
Mm-hmm. But he's against gay marriage.
Is he? I don't know.
Aye, go figure, mate.
Aye.
Honestly, that.
They want to get
that winds me
married,
up.
so just vote against myself. That's brilliant.
But again, there's loads of people like that as well. There's not too many. But
Christopher
there's a
Biggins
few.
is like that. as
Christopher
well.
Biggins, that's the name I was trying to get.
But the good thing about democracy is, I don't know.
You're allowed to do that.
I don't know. I'm saying the good thing about democracy is that I don't know what the result's going to be, and nobody does.
No.
And therefore, the really good thing is it is in the hands of the people who are selecting who's going to represent them. And
That's a nice statement, but realistically, you've got a pretty good idea. I mean, surely
really?
you know by polls
Come on,
and
come on.
stuff.
Like, you've got
There's
to.
a pretty like I know that Peter Grant's like 90% chance going to win
We're
in this area.
pretty much guaranteed that up here, really.
Surely you know.
Aye. Are you not allowed to say, or are you just
no, you're
not willing
allowed to say it.
You're just humble.
Aye.
I just think, I
Has he got it?
really think it's better that type of speculation
Mhm.
can bias the way in which people respond.
I suppose in a way, aye.
And-
That makes sense.
And you see, and what I would prefer, what I think is better, is that if I'm elected, if I'm fortunate enough to be elected, I would like to think it's because people are voting on issues other than who do they think's going to win.
Mhm.
Right.
Are you with me?
That makes sense.
So, and I think that would be a good thing. So, the honest answer is I don't know,
Mhm.
but I don't really want to speculate for those reasons.
That's fair. That's
See,
fair.
that's where me and you'll disagree because I quite like speculating.
Well,
Aye.
that's
Oh,
fine.
obviously you're a candidate, so it's different for you. But for
Mhm.
me as a reporter,
We're-
I'm going
we're
to say
kind of
reporter.
reporting, aye,
Reporter
aye.
sounds more important.
Journalist. sounds
Journalist.
Mhm.
As a journalist, I quite like speculating.
I love what I did there. It sounds better. Like we could just add it into your whatever this is.
Yeah.
Well, I'm proficient in being a politician. I've been a candidate in the council elections. I've done 2 hustings.
Yes. If people want to know what the chances are, there are 2 things they can do. They can either decide, do I like to see what bookies odds are, and go in and see what
Mhm.
bookies are giving odds. So I don't know. And secondly, there are some sites like Electoral Calculus, I think is one,
Mhm.
where they have got sophisticated ways, and what they do is try and work out the probability or percentage chance that different parties have. So if people are interested, there are ways in which they can check it out for themselves. But
So-
it wouldn't be the way in which but I would like to encourage people to vote for who they think would be their best representative.
So I've got
Is this where we get into difficult questions now? We've
No,
stopped enjoying
no,
ourselves.
really, it's
Depends
it's-
obviously how
it's
long
really-
Roger's got.
Is it 10 to 1?
It's 10 to 1.
Been on for a while.
Oh, it's 10 to 1.
Mm.
You want to rush off
Well,
just when we're getting to the.
well, the one thing I would say is that I do have a campaign to take part in,
What
Mhm.
time?
and I'll
What time?
probably have to leave from here in about 10 to 15 minutes max.
Right.
Right.
If we get
So
a kind of last
quickly
point,
ask this one. It's kind of speculation, but it's not really. I
Well,
was
that's
told.
my favourite kind of speculation.
I was told specifically to
really.
not ask about Indir F2. So I'm going to kind of ask about Indir F2.
just goes against the
Aye,
rules.
totally. It was Jock Penman who told me not to say that. So the YouGov thing has put out the first thing about how many seats each party's going to get, and the SNP went down from 54 currently SNP sitting seats to 50, and the SNP is saying that anything above a majority would constitute support for a second independence referendum. My question is, do you agree with that? And if so, how do you answer the fact that you've lost? You'd have then lost support technically.
Right. Well, let me tell you what I think.
Is that a tough question? I think that's a tough
No.
question.
That
No,
seems
it's
alright.
not a tough
So
question.
scoosh.
Easy peasy.
Humbled is like yes.
This election is not about giving a mandate, because that already exists.
Right.
It existed because in the manifesto of the SNP for the Scottish Parliament elections, it indicated that there would only be another independence referendum if there was a material change in the circumstances. And it gave this specific example then. And they said, for example, if Scotland was dragged out of the EU against the wishes of the Scottish people. Obviously the writers of the manifesto couldn't know that's what was going to occur. They just gave
No.
that as an example.
Mhm.
But because of that, and they were elected, there was then that election endorsement of the manifesto. But that was not enough for the SNP in Parliament. So what they did in the Scottish Parliament was they brought forward a debate and a vote on the issue of whether there should be an independence referendum under those circumstances. And the vote in the Scottish Parliament went in the way of saying yes, there should be. So both in terms of the endorsement of the manifesto for the Scottish Parliament, right, and also in terms of the vote in the Scottish Parliament itself, that to me supplies a mandate to be exercised. It doesn't say when it should happen, and the view of Nicola, and I have to say the view of myself, is it should not happen until there is clarity in the choice that people are facing because of the Brexit discussions.
Mhm.
So what we will know is, we'll know after about, probably from now it'll be about 15 months at least away, we will know what the negotiated settlement between the UK and the European Union is.
Mhm.
How hard this hard Brexit is going to be. Once that is known, it means that our view is the Scottish people should have the opportunity to say, do you want to go with this arrangement within the UK completely out with the European Union or any connection with Europe, because that's what they're planning, right? Or do you want to go with an alternative, which would see an independent Scotland deciding for itself what relationship it wanted to have with the continent of Europe and the like. And I think that is a reasonable proposition to allow the people to have a say at. I'm not afraid of democracy.
But
Now, and the example I would give, I mean, the people who are the most hypocritical at this there's a lot of people who are hypocritical. The Tories are saying campaigning, and even in the local elections, not about local election stuff, which you will know, Craig, since you're a candidate. And they've been campaigning much of this campaign not on their damaging policies in Westminster. They've been fighting everything and saying vote for us and we'll stop an independence referendum because they say there was no demand for it. Right? How hypocritical can you get from a party that decided when there was absolutely no demand from any quarter whatsoever for a general election, and she decides off her own bat, oh, we'll suddenly have a general election.
That's true.
And brought it forward, and then and very naively, I thought, why did Jeremy Corbyn lead his troops in to support Theresa May, effectively undermining the Fixed Term Parliament Act, right? And to have a quick general election? So there was no popular demand for that, right? This would be a much more substantial thing, considering the implications of leaving the European Union and where people want their future to be. The other party that's entirely hypocritical about this is the Lib Dems. They're running around campaigning saying, we mustn't have a referendum that gives the Scottish people a choice, but we want another referendum on the result of Brexit as long as it's only at the level of the whole of the UK so that Scotland's voice doesn't matter.
I've got a question on this, because the SNP seem to be tying staying in Europe with independence quite a lot. So for people like me who wanted to leave the EU on left-wing terms, not UKIP terms, why should we support the second independence referendum while also knowing that the SNP are pushing for that in line with staying in the EU?
What we have been pushing for, our compromise proposal of last year to the UK government, was not that. Our compromise proposal was to say, if the UK is coming out of the EU, right, there should be the right of Scotland to negotiate a bespoke deal, a unique arrangement to give us access to the single market, which you don't need to be a member of the EU to have access to the single market, right? And to be part of other arrangements. I mean, when you voted to come out of the EU for your own reasons, Craig, did you know when you were voting to coming out of the European Medical Agency?
No. I assume because
do you know why?
Why?
You don't need to come out of the European Medical Agency.
Yeah, I know. I know you don't need to come out of the single market either.
You don't need to come out of Euratom, the European Atomic Energy Association, the thing that guarantees standards to the nuclear industry and the like. You're not going to tell me that you want to see no standards set for that. You're not going to tell me that you don't want to have proper regulation of drugs and the like that are used.
No, but you also don't need the EU to do that. You could regulate it yourself. You could have personal regulation. You could have national regulations as opposed to international regulations.
Yeah. And how long do you think it's going to take to set up a medical agency able to do that sort of drug and medical investigation and testing? And
it'll take a while. But if you're working on international regulations and they decide to change it for everybody, and it's a change that you don't want.
Yes, but all I'm saying is, this is where we might differ here.
That's why we voted differently.
Because I would think there is a sense in making sure there are broad international standards on some matters, and that internationalism, engaging with other people in some things, is not something that is of concern to me. I would like to see more of it.
That's my end goal. That's the end goal, but I don't think it works in the way it is.
I can well understand. I've been very critical of a lot of the way in which the EU operates myself for many years. Right? It's a matter of a judgment where you think the balance of interest lies. I mean, I have been encouraged that because of the expansion of the EU, there has been more and more influence coming to some of the larger number of smaller countries now. Right now, Germany and France don't necessarily like that, but I do like the fact that there are many more voices now, and some of these voices are more progressive than was the case in the early days of the European Union, which is why we've had some progress in a number of rights and the like. So, I mean, I respect your view, but my view is, even if you're coming out the EU, would you want Scotland's voice and interests to be present at those negotiations? Because at the moment they're saying there will be no representation of Scotland's interests or voice in the negotiations.
Well, in that situation, I would say that everybody else would. I would say that it seems to be a club for people, and if you're not in the club, you didn't get a say. And I don't think that's right. I think that it should be a case where you shouldn't need. Wow. You shouldn't need. You shouldn't need lots of different groups in order to have a say. It should just be everybody just being able to have a say. It should be a bunch of friends having a say, as opposed to one group, and then if you're not in the group, you're not allowed to say.
I would respond if I understood the point you were making.
If you're not in the EU, if you're not, you need to apply to be in the EU, and if you can't apply to be in the EU, you don't get a say in anything the EU does. And I think that's wrong. I think it should be a bunch of friends having a conversation.
There are. Well, there are. Yeah. So you're slightly more anarchic.
Aye.
Than I would be.
Yeah.
Right, which is fair enough. You know, everyone's entitled to a view. My view is that even if we're going to come out of the EU through these negotiations, right, my view is that there are particular interests that Scotland has that need to be protected, and I would want to see. I've argued from the outset there should be protection for European citizens, which is not guaranteed by this, right? I have argued from the outset that there should be protection of our universities and our research, which is not guaranteed as it is at the moment. I want to see guarantee for the free movement of labour, right? I am not against immigration, right? And
neither am I.
Right? And so, and the danger is that what we're going to see is a hard right Brexit, this process, unless we can get other voices of a more progressive nature somehow involved, which I think might be a long shot, but I think it's the responsibility of people like myself to argue that Scotland's voice should be heard, and here are the specific issues we want to campaign to try and protect, so that it's perfectly possible to respect the views of everybody who voted in the European referendum, whether they voted to exit or not, and to say, but there are some things that we want to see attended to properly in negotiations. And I mean, hopefully that's not a divisive point between us, right? Then what we could have, if we knew we had a voice, what we could then have is a better discussion about what are the things we want to protect and what are the things we're quite happy to see change, right? But we can't have that discussion at that level and make it effective unless we know we're going to have some say in the process.
So that's all my questions. I'd love to keep going on, but you
did.
You have to go.
So if you want to say why you should be elected, or if you want to run off,
I'm quite happy to leave it to the people to decide themselves. What I would say is I hope I've been completely transparent and honest in the discussions with you, and people will make up their own mind as they should in a democracy. And I've always been happy to leave it to the people to decide.
Thank you very much for coming.
Okay, thanks for having me.
Thanks very much, Roger.
Right.
Perfect.